The portal window may have closed, but the #1 running back just hit the market today. I know, don't worry. We'll explain how that works. The player, though, it's Ole Miss star Quinshon Judkins. So now what? Our experts weigh in. And the quarterback dominos, well, they just continue to fall. One fell into the draft and others are falling into place. We'll have the latest. Plus, what does the class after the class look like? We'll head to Boulder to find out what Coach Prime is doing to follow up his historic portal haul from last season. We'll also head to San Antonio to check in with the guys at the All-American Bowl. You are watching the 24/7 Sports Transfer Portal Show. Hello and welcome in. I am Emily Proud. Before we get rolling, a reminder to subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Also, please like this video so we know that you're watching. That's my only spiel because we have not had a show for a while because of the holidays. We have a lot to talk about, so let's jump right in with our transfer portal expert, Chris Hummer. Chris, real quick though, before we get into the news, how are players still entering the portal despite it having closed earlier this week?
Well, I mean, the portal's closed, but it's not technically closed because there are a lot of exceptions. Grad transfers can go in at any time. And I think what we're seeing most the last 24 hours or so are two different rules. One, it can take compliance a while. This is ultimately just a big Excel sheet or paperwork system that the NCAA has going. And oftentimes it could take up to 48 hours for a player to enter the portal once he's asked him to put his name in. So you're seeing stragglers that way. And additionally, players get an extra 5 days after their bowl game or postseason appearance to enter the portal. So you can see players from Alabama, Texas, for example, enter the portal through, I believe, tomorrow or even Saturday.
And we have. If you want to get more information on that, Chris has a great story up right now on 247sports.com. But let's get to the news of the day. Ole Miss star running back Quinshon Judkins has confirmed his plans to enter the portal. This is a big one. So what can you tell us about how this all went down?
Well, our Matt Zenitz reported it earlier this morning that he was going in the portal. And frankly, this is something we've been tracking for a while, like going back to November ahead of the opening of the portal window. Ole Miss, at the beginning of that, had really done a good job keeping him in a house. But this popped up in the last 24 hours that Judkins was again potentially threatening to leave, and he ended up doing so. And I think, frankly, it's fair to say this came down to NIL. This is the era we're in college football, and I think Quinshon Judkins wanted more than Ole Miss was willing to offer in this case. Negotiations have been happening behind the scenes for a while, and I think it just conversations broke down between the two parties, and now Quinshon Judkins is likely headed elsewhere. I talked to somebody at Ole Miss today that's not expecting him to come back, and I think Quinshon Judkins' process will be open to teams that can fit what he wants, both on the field and off.
Yeah, Ole Miss is a great example of the good and the bad of the portal. They've got the #1 portal class, but they lose a star player today, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that with Carl Reed in a bit. But before Judkins entered, Toledo running back Penny Boone was actually the top available back. He is taking some visits. He has one planned to Louisville this weekend. So what is the latest with his recruitment?
Well, Penny Boone's an interesting one. I believe he ran for over 1,400 yards this year, was one of the touchdown leaders in the country. Big back, 6'1", 240, likes to run over people. I think he finished 4th nationally in yards after contact. So he's somebody a lot of people are interested in. As you said, he told me he's visiting Louisville this coming weekend, but Florida State is still pushing hard to potentially getting him on campus. And he also told me Miami is in the mix for him as well for a potential visit. So 2 Sunshine State schools, 3 ACC schools overall, fighting for Penny Boone, somebody who started his career at Maryland and found a resurgence of sorts at Toledo this year. Was one of the top running backs in the country.
Yeah, a lot of people after him. A lot of schools still need a quarterback, and those dominoes continue to fall as some of the top guys either decide to commit or go to the NFL. So right now, the top 2 in the portal are Caden Salter and Malachi Nelson. Which quarterback-needy teams are in play for them?
Well, the Caden Salter market, I think, needs to start with Auburn. The Tigers obviously have a very strong connection to Caden Salter. Hugh Freeze was his coach at Liberty in 2021 and 2022. Helped him find a soft landing spot after a rough exit at Tennessee for Caden Salter. And obviously the last 2 seasons, Salter has emerged as one of the best quarterbacks in the group of 5. I think they are the main team to watch there, though I could see a school like Miami potentially entering the mix because Miami's quarterback options haven't really worked out the way they would have liked to this cycle. Speaking of Miami, Malachi Nelson's a name that's been associated with the Hurricanes. But I would say overall, Malachi Nelson, the former 5-star recruit from USC's market, has been a little more tepid than you might expect. Our Greg Biggins reported he's visiting Boise State this weekend, and Boise State is in potentially a really good position to land him. That lines up with what I've been hearing about Nelson overall. I think he's going to be kind of an upper level G5 quarterback in the market right now, or maybe one of the lower level P5 teams potentially. I don't expect him to end up at some of these larger schools, but as teams get desperate, you never know. But right now I like where Boise State sits with him.
Seems like the opposite is true with the market for Will Howard. USC leads in the crystal balls right now, but as I said, the market is hot. Everybody wants a piece of him. Where do you see this one going?
Well, he's in Columbus right now. He's visiting the Buckeyes. This is something that's been on the radar for a couple weeks now. We've talked about it before, Ohio State having some interest in Will Howard. Nothing concrete had happened. But after the bowl game, I think Ohio State had to take a look at its quarterback room, not only because of Devin Brown's injury, but perhaps the performance they had in the bowl game, especially with Kyle McCord choosing to move on to Syracuse. So Ohio State is pushing for Will Howard. Will Howard is another one of those transfer portal quarterbacks, along with Cam Ward, who is giving strong consideration to the NFL. And that is certainly still an option for him, but I do like where the Buckeyes sit here. I know the crystal balls are all on USC, and at one point Will Howard was trending heavily towards USC. But right now, I think I would put the Buckeyes in the pole position, although it's not done at this point. So right now, I think the Buckeyes are in pretty good shape for Will Howard.
If we've learned anything during the portal cycle or during high school recruiting, is that these things are fluid and they frequently change. On the defensive side of the ball, we have a commitment today. Former Purdue edge Nick Scorton has committed to Texas A&M following an official visit there. Seems to have liked his trip, but what went into the Texas native returning home now to play for the Aggies?
Well, he's not only a Texas native, he's from Bryan, Texas, which is essentially 10 minutes away from College Station. It's essentially the same town. Like, he grew up watching the Aggies. They let him walk out the door the first time around to go to Purdue. And I believe he was in the 2022 class, so that same time where they were signing Walter Nolan and dozens of other 5-stars. It felt like Nick Scorton ended up leaving the state and going to Purdue. This past season, he led the Big Ten in sacks. And I think this is a pretty huge win for Texas A&M. They needed to add talent along the defensive line in the portal. And they got arguably the top edge player in the portal, period, Nick Scorton. So this is huge for Mike Elko in year one. It's certainly a salve to a lot of A&M fans after losing 5-star after 5-star on the defensive line. And I think it gives them a really nice building block moving forward along that unit.
I'll have the hometown kid coming and playing for the Aggies, too. It's a fun story. While we have established that the portal is mostly closed, that does not mean that the news cycle stops. So what are some things that we should watch as we head into the spring?
You certainly need to keep a track of some of these players that are on playoff teams that could still enter the portal. I'm still monitoring a few that could potentially go in. Graduate transfers can enter at any time. I think quarterbacks, as always, are going to be the stories. Miami, USC, Auburn all need to figure out their quarterback rooms moving forward. And then the spring transfer portal window, once spring ball happens, is going to be a bonanza. I think there's about 2,200 players in the portal right now, FBS. Last year, we finished around 3,500. So if you do the math, you're talking about another 1,300 players or so who are likely to enter the portal between now and the end of April. So it's going to be a crazy couple months for sure.
Already been a crazy couple months. Chris, is there ever a slow time here? We know that despite it all, you will be all over this, and we appreciate your work, and you can check out more of it at 247sports.com. That is the place to get all the intel. You've got transfer portal rankings, info, analysis. You can find it all on 247sports.com.
This Carl Reed with 24/7 Sports.
That means they don't take breaks if they 24/7.
Around the clock.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander. You in the class of 2024, you better stop playing around and make a decision.
And I go in there with my wife, and Mike Norvell is talking to a bunch of recruits, and he's got it pumping, he's got it going on. I leave the room with Dan Lannon, but my wife stays in the room with Mike Norvell, and I thought she was going to get in the transfer portal.
If they are going to be recruiting every day, you better be working every day. and that's the real deal.
But Dr. Reed is like Nate Dogg. You know it's a hit when he spit.
It's time now to read between the lines with the coach, Carl Reed. This is, of course, Transfer Portal Edition. We have seen that so many times, and we still giggle every time. The stories that this man has is just fantastic. But let's start with the analysis, because there's a lot of things that have happened during this cycle, starting with DJU to Florida State. This is now the third school in 3 seasons for the former 5-star. What do you think about this next marriage for him?
I think this is perfect. Florida State needed a quarterback. They also tried to get involved with Cam Ward, and that didn't go. DJU, after the season he had at Oregon State, Clemson faltered a little bit, and DJU was a big blame the year before for why people felt like Clemson wasn't competing. He kind of shut a lot of that up this year at Oregon State. John Smith leaves and goes to Michigan State. DJU comes to Tallahassee with a chance to compete against his former Clemson team. He's coming down there also, Emily, with a big chip on his shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
He feels like he has a lot to prove. I think this is perfect for Mike Norvell, one of the premier quarterback coaches and offensive minds in the game. I think it's a match made in heaven.
Absolutely love the revenge factor to all of this, too. That's what makes it very exciting. Elsewhere in the quarterback market, Oregon, they had a pretty nice cycle when it comes to the QB position. They got both Dillon Gabriel and Dante Moore. Considering both of their levels of experience, and that Dillon Gabriel has a lot of it, Dante Moore has a lot of excitement about what his future could be, how beneficial is it to have both of those things covered for Dan Lanning?
In a game that you're one play away from having to play your backup in case of injury or anything like that, Dillon Gabriel is a proven commodity. He's been productive. Dante Moore is a guy with loads of potential, played well for UCLA this year at times. And so to have him as a backup and be willing to come in and learn the system, that's huge, because you're super talented in that room. You have your guy for the present and your guy for the future. And when guys like Evan Stewart visiting, when you hear that he's visiting the other pieces that they've added, explosive offense in Oregon, and Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks are proving that they're going all in, all money in right now on trying to win the national title.
It's scary because we look at their transition to the Big Ten and we say, well, they're beefing up on the lines of scrimmage to get ready to go, and they've done a fantastic job at that. Now they're getting in some skill positions, some quarterbacks. The Ducks are going to be scary in their first year in the Big Ten next year. Well, speaking of Moore, he, Aiden Childs, Malachi Nelson, Lance Hurd, they were some of the more higher profile true freshmen to hit the transfer portal. And anytime that happens, you look at it as, oh no, they made a mistake coming out of high school and they're switching it up really quickly, and you kind of press the panic button. But what sort of effect does it actually have on the college football landscape when you see true freshmen hit the portal after 1 year?
I don't think it has any effect on it at all, except for overreaction maybe from fans. The college football product is as good as it's ever been. Ratings are through the roof. Everybody's watching. Did you see the playoff games last week with the guys that were out there playing football? So college football is at an all-time high. When you look at all of those quarterbacks transferring, everybody's situation is different. You had coaching changes that led to transfers. You had guys that wanted more playing time or the opportunity to play. There's an old saying where I'm from, Emily, in St. Louis: if I ain't starting, I'm departing, and if I ain't playing, I ain't staying. You know, and so that comes into effect with the transfer portal, and so those guys have that option, and a lot of them look to it.
Yeah, I mean, Malachi Nelson's a great example of that wonderful saying, is that he could potentially be going to Boise State, a place that he can come in and make an immediate impact. But I'm curious, what are the potential impacts on high school recruiting when these guys flip-flop so quickly?
Well, for high school kids, when you look at the transfer portal, one of the things right now that everybody is saying is the transfer portal is hurting high school kids. It's hurting some high school kids. It's not hurting the top guys. If you're in the top 20 players in the country right now, top 200 players, I mean, if you're in that group, the transfer portal hasn't hurt those guys. Those guys are still all going Power 5. They're still all going to big-time schools. Who it's hurting, Emily, are the borderline guys, the guys that are 250 on down. They're not being able to sneak into some of those situations anymore. So it just depends on how you look at it. It is hurting some high school players, but it's not hurting the guys that are the cream of the crop.
What about for the players themselves? Is this going to show up as a red flag, as we always like to say, come draft time, that they're switching schools so quickly, what kind of effect does it have there?
What matters the most during draft time is what you put on tape. Are you good enough to play in the National Football League? The conversation always starts with that. The only thing that can hurt you tremendously is there a character issue? Is there drugs? Is there domestic violence? Are there things of that nature? Those are the things that kill your draft stock. Jumping from school to school, that's helped guys draft stock. If we're looking at it, look at the guys that are getting drafted in the first round. Over the next 2 to 3 years, I would predict that 80% of the first and second round of the draft will be guys who've transferred at least once. The NFL GMs and the scouts, they're not looking at those things as red flags if you can put on tape. Football is a business, and at the end of the day, playing big-time football gives you the best opportunity to do good business.
Yeah, and clearly a guy like Dante Moore did not burn any bridges because he was initially committed to Oregon and then went to UCLA and now back to Oregon. So it just, drives home the point of relationships and how incredibly important they are. And that's what's going to matter.
Everybody is saying that these guys are hurting themselves by transfers. Well, if that was the case, then people wouldn't recruit them.
Yeah.
You got guys transferring now multiple times, and instantly they're getting 20, 30 offers from big-time schools. They're not dropping levels in a lot of cases if they're good enough. The guys who are talented, rules don't affect talented guys. They don't affect the cream of the crop. They do affect guys that are borderline, and you need to really know who you are.
It's not one size fits all for any of these things. Speaking of, Cam Ward made the decision to hit the NFL draft. What do you think of that?
When Cam Ward went into the transfer portal, there were reports of an astronomical amount of money being asked for from an NIL standpoint. And I think that gave a lot of guys in the market false hope, because as he started to visit schools, I think what ended up happening from the coaches that I've talked to at the schools he visited was that ask was just too high, and most college collectives felt like they couldn't go there. So if you want the money, you go to the place that you know has the money that you want, and that's the National Football League.
Especially if you're a quarterback. It's a pretty good time to be a QB in the NFL. Ole Miss, we talked about them earlier in the show. They are our #1 portal team for good reason. Lane Kiffin got 4 players in the top 15, including the #1 overall player in Walter Nolan. Where can this group coming in take the Rebels this fall?
They can take them to the college football playoffs, which is what all of these moves are for. Lane Kiffin has always been a dog. Regardless of what people may think about him as a person, the way he coaches offensive football, the way that he has been relentless in recruiting is big time. Now he goes out and adds the defensive pieces to take his program to the next level. He's sending a message right now with the way he has recruited the transfer portal that he wants Ole Miss in the playoffs, and he wants an opportunity to win it all.
Yeah, and with bringing in those transfer portal players, there's, of course, the sacrifice that you make for some of the current players on the roster, and we saw that as evident by Quinshon Judkins hitting the portal today. How do you weigh that as a coach?
Well, as a coach, you're going to win some and you're going to lose some. You're going to lose them the same way that you got them, and that's just the business, and that's just the game. There's somebody in Ole Miss that'll step up and take those carries. He'll come up with some way to be dynamic still offensively. That's just part of the business.
It's part of the business. Part of this business, being on the show, means that we're going to answer your viewer questions. And we got a good one here from Chris saying, Coach, you said that money just wasn't there with Ward. Why does it seem like players continually ask for more money than they're worth?
Because they're reading the internet. That's number one. It's not like the National Football League when you can look clearly at this pay scale and see what it is. Collective bargaining has done that. Nobody really knows what the truth is. Guys will call me all the time and they'll say, well, this is what I want. And I say, well, you're probably not going to get that. There have been a couple of decommitments and parting of ways between recruits and teams in the last couple of weeks because they couldn't come to reasonable and realistic financial terms. And most of the players that are going through this process do not have legitimate representation from respectable agents. They have different people handling their business that probably shouldn't be, and just it's out of whack the numbers that some of these guys are asking for, especially when you turn their tape on, because it doesn't match up. Some of these guys that are asking for a bunch of money should just be okay with the scholarship they're getting. They haven't balled like that.
Yeah, so what I learned from this is do not read the internet, but read between the lines. I had to do it. It was right there. Andrew's got a question here. How is Lane I'm assuming he's referring to Lane Kiffin. They're on a first-name basis, owning the defensive side of the portal. He's an offensive coach, but has some insane ads on defense.
Because he's a great recruiter. He's very personal. He's attacked it himself in a lot of ways, and he's going after. And kids like being around him, man. He's a very cool guy to be around, from what all of the kids say. His involvement on social media, he's a great follow on Twitter as well. Kids love him, and they love the cool factor, and he has that.
He also has the dog, and Juice Kiffin, who's a fantastic follow on Twitter as well. I think all of that together just makes him somebody that they gravitate towards.
Absolutely.
And we'll see if it turns into some results on the field next season. But Carl, thanks so much for being here, as always, for your great information. We're going to continue the discussion of the transfer portal and show you the top rankings right now. The winter window, as we said, has closed, but some players can still enter. They can commit whenever, so this could change. But you see the Rebels in the top spot. The team we've highlighted, though, Colorado, last year's #1 team, is not far behind as the #2 portal class. And it doesn't have maybe the record-breaking numbers like we saw last season, but let's dig a little deeper into Coach Prime's incoming transfers and welcome on Adam Munsterteiger of BuffStampede.com. And Adam, the rebuild is still on, which means that Prime is very active right now in the portal. So let's start with some of the help he's bringing in on offense. Former Vandy wide receiver Will Sheppard. What are you expecting to see from him immediately?
I expect him to replace the production that Xavier Weaver had in Colorado's offense in 2023. He led Colorado in receiving, and Will Sheppard comes over and he should replace that. Like I said, he could even take it a step further. This is somebody that caught over 150 passes, had over 2,000 receiving yards at Vanderbilt the previous 3 seasons, but went largely under the radar in college football. He was on a Vanderbilt team that went 9-27 those 3 seasons. So now coming to play for Coach Prime and the Buffs, he's going to have a lot of eyeballs on him. His goal is obviously to get the attention of NFL scouts, and this is a move he feels will give him that extra exposure. And big target, 6'3", 205. A number of SEC Big Ten schools came after him as a transfer. Like I said, there's a real opportunity with him and Travis Hunter to be the top 2 receivers in Boulder in 2024.
Whew. And plus side, his family does not have to buy a new wardrobe. They've already got the same color, so that works out. A big emphasis is definitely on adding pieces on the defensive side of the ball, and they've done that by way of former Pitt defensive lineman Samuel Okunlola. How important was it to land him?
Yeah, just like replacing Xavier Weaver's production at receiver was important, Colorado needed to replace the production on the edge of Jordan Dominic, who was one of their top defensive players this past year. They really liked the potential of Arden Walker, a local edge player that transferred back home from Missouri last year and started to show some flashes improvement during the 2023 season, but you needed to add another experienced piece in there. And Samuel Okunlola is not super experienced, but this is somebody that as a redshirt freshman tied for the team lead at Pittsburgh in team sacks, was only on the field for 266 defensive snaps for the whole season. So he was extremely productive in the reps that he did see in their defense. So he's a plug and play guy in pass rush situations right away. And then if you can kind of make him into a more well-rounded edge player, I think as his career progresses, he'll be more of that four down edge type guy, and then potentially grow into an NFL type prospect. But it was a situation where Okunlola was really coming into his own late during his redshirt freshman season at Pittsburgh. So the sky seems to be the limit with him and his potential.
It's exactly what you want, is somebody that's coming in and plug and play, but also has a, as you said, sky high potential. I think we have great potential on the show because a lot of people are watching, but we've not gotten a lot of likes. So go ahead and hit that like button if you have not already. How could you not like this discussion? We love talking Colorado and portal, and the Buffs fans watching right now want to know, what other additions are you most excited about on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, Coach Prime, since the 2023 season ended, has said on many occasions, we have got to get better at stopping the run. That was one of the issues that they had on that side of the ball during his first year in Boulder. So bringing in a guy like DJ Lundy from Florida State is a huge get for Colorado. Lundy actually graded out by PFF as the top linebacker against the run nationally in 2023. Now, he's got a little work to do in terms of his pass coverage, but he's exactly the type of linebacker that the Buffs wanted to insert into their defense for 2024. He played in 42 games at Florida State. 13 of those were starts, so he's going to come over with a lot of experience, as will Preston Hodge, a 4-star transfer on 24/7. He graded out as the top defender on Liberty's defense. That was a Liberty team that went undefeated until they faced off against Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. So he's a guy that's going to have some versatility to his game. He can play nickelback or safety. I think we've got a listed as a safety on 24/7 right now, but he's a guy that I see actually coming in and battling for the cornerback spot opposite Travis Hunter. That was a spot that struggled at times during the 2023 season with the number of different players rotating through there, including poor Monty McLean. So you're going to have a pretty deep competition at that other cornerback spot, whereas there were some issues at that position this past season.
Coach Prime likes to say he ain't hard to find. Well, I think he ain't over yet, because he's going to continue to add players. I mentioned multiple times on this show that the portal window has closed, but not really. There's still some players that can enter, and there's still plenty that are available. Oh yeah, there's the spring portal window. So what other needs does Coach Prime need to address?
I think they'd like to add another defensive tackle through the portal, possibly another linebacker. They would probably actually like to add on the edge as well. They like what Samuel Okunlola, as we talked about, his potential. Arden Walker there, but not a ton of depth behind those guys. You're definitely going to want to bring in another tight end. That is actually a need that they might fill through the junior college ranks. Greg Ross is a guy that has pretty high interest in Colorado from the JUCO ranks. And then lastly, I think you probably want to add one more offensive tackle as well. They've coined it Operation Protect 2, 2 obviously being Shedeur Sanders. You have flashbacks to the 2023 season. He was sacked 52 times in 10.5 games. And so you can't have too much competition on the offensive line. They've already brought in 5 transfers on the offensive line. You're bringing in Jordan Seaton, the number 1 ranked offensive tackle in the 2024 class. But again, you probably want to just add one more piece for assurance. Matthew Bedford was committed to them for a short period of time before flipping to Oregon. So to fill that with one more offensive tackle by the time they kick off spring ball seems like a good idea. But, they've definitely addressed most of the needs that they have already.
Yeah, it's just luxuries now, building that depth that we know is all too important in college football, especially the long season that they play. Adam, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it. You can check out more of his work at buffstampede.com. They are the place to be for everything Coach Prime, Colorado, recruiting, everything that you need. Head to buffstampede.com. Well, the portal is just one piece of roster building, and a big event in the world of high school recruiting is currently happening down in San Antonio, the All-American Bowl practices leading up to the game on Saturday. So here's Blair Angulo and friends with more.
Thanks, Emily. We are in San Antonio, Texas, here for the 2024 All-American Bowl. The Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins, and National Recruiting Analyst Cooper Patagna to break down some of the standouts, some of the top performers that we have witnessed here in practices both at the Alamodome and at Trinity University. And let's begin with you, Andrew. A couple of players that are headed to Clemson have caught your eye.
Yeah, the pass catchers. You think about Clemson, we know Dabo Sweeney hasn't really embraced the transfer portal, so that true freshman class has to play. And I think if you start with tight end Christian Bentancur, a late add to the game, he was excellent during that joint practice between the East and West, create separation. You look at him, what he did on the field as a senior there in Illinois, caught 21 passes in his final game as a senior. He was excellent. Tough cover for the linebackers, really like him. And then TJ Moore, the wide receiver out of Tampa, a guy a ton of schools fought for back during the summer months, someone we had ranked inside our top 247. Normally you want the verified data points on him, but we shot him up there just based on the film. And then you look at him during one-on-ones, during the team session, he's getting deep. He is looking like one of the top wide receivers in the country. Came in at 6'3". That was a bit of a surprise to us. We didn't know he was that tall, and he can jump out of the building. So those two guys really stood out to me.
Cooper, speaking of pass catchers, maybe a player we don't know where he's headed yet, Gatlin Bear, sounds like he's down to Michigan and Oregon. The player from Idaho, who is a bit of an enigma. We were hoping to see some things from him, and you've been really impressed.
Yeah, that's why this week is so important. You get into this setting a little bit. You get the guy from Idaho. He comes out here, and there's no issue whatsoever. He looked at one of the best players on the field, especially in the morning session. He followed that up. Joint practices was really impressive as well. You get him out there, a little shade under 6'2", floating around 200 pounds. He can do everything. We know 10-1-8 guy in the 100 meters. So in terms of the speed, I think the thing that kind of stood out a little bit was the lateral agility, right? This guy in terms of in-breaking receiver can do a lot of different things, strong at the catch point as well. So super impressed with him. Drew, I think times we've come out here, guys from rural areas, they've struggled in this setting. Carter Nelson, one of those guys that I think it's going to take him a little bit of time to acclimate. That is not the case with Gatlinburg.
He's been making plays. Another pass catcher that's been making plays, Jordan Shipp, had a couple of touchdown grabs on Tuesday during practices this week. What have you thought about Jordan Shipp and what he might bring to the Tar Heels?
Yeah, he was our co-alpha dog for the session, and Jordan Shipp, another late add to the game. We've had all these opt-outs. We've had to go down the list, and we're glad we got him in here. Headed to North Carolina, caught passes from Jaden Davis, who's obviously now at Michigan, helping them prepare for the college football final in a few days. Over 1,000 yards as a senior, over 1,000 yards as a junior. He looks ready to go kind of day one, 6 foot, 190 pounds. You could have told me he was 215 pounds. He can roll and he can track the football in that deeper third. He was given all types of defensive backs fits when we had that joint practice. I think he is just a complete receiver. And you look at what North Carolina wants to do on offense with Mac Brown there. I mean, they like to throw it around, get those guys involved. I think he's a name you need to know in Chapel Hill moving forward.
Yeah, big-time playmaker. Quarterbacks have had to get these guys the ball. There's 6 here in San Antonio, 3 on both teams, and there's one that's headed to the SEC that you've really liked, Coop.
Yeah, I love Walker White. I mean, you think about him, the guy that we have compared him to throughout this entire process has been Will Levis. We've been doing that for a year, and then he gets here, I think, half an inch and maybe 3 or 4 pounds difference, right? In an extremely toolsy passer who's improved as a senior, completion percentage improved. And you think about Auburn, what's the first thing you think about when you think about this class? Those dynamic receivers, right? You got Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Bryce Kane, Malcolm Simmons. Who's going to get those guys to football? They're still trying to figure that out right now. How about this guy? How about Walker White, right? And you think about the opportunity here in San Antonio because of the opt-outs. We had 6 invites at the quarterback position. Who was going to step up? Walker White, one of those late additions. He's been awesome this week. So natural in terms of the ball popping off his hand. He can make every throw on the field. Fast forward the clock 3 to 4 years from now, this is going to be a guy that NFL scouts are going to be drooling over. And what a project for Hugh Freeze. This is the type of player you want in your building.
Some of the best aspects of an event like this or a week like this is the competitive spirit. It's elite on elite, and we get to see the offensive linemen match up against some defensive linemen that are their size, maybe something we don't really see at the high school level. Kevin Haywood has been a player that's caught your attention, Drew.
Yeah, I don't think we've really talked enough about what Luke Fickell has been able to do with his recruiting class. Finish, I think it's their best class in over a decade. Ernest Weiler, we saw him flash a little bit at the Under Armour practices. Now you have Kevin Haywood, and I've been wondering, how did this guy get out of Pennsylvania? 6'6.5", 298 pounds. He wears that extremely well. I mean, he could carry 320, prototypical left tackle. And you think Wisconsin, when they were good, they had those linemen, those developmental guys. You stash them on the roster for a few years, get them in the weight room, and then they move people out of the way. I think Kevin Haywood can do just that. Reach is there, frame is there, and he was good during one-on-ones, just kind of extending the arc, giving Walker White and those other quarterbacks some time to throw. So he's been super impressive. And I think Luke Fickell, that strength program, I mean, watch out 2-3 years down the line.
We're a couple weeks removed now from the early signing period and the drama that surrounded Ryan Wingo, but he's still making headlines out here.
He had a good day today. He needed it, right? This is a guy that we have tucked inside the top 15. I think the number 4 receiver in the country, right behind Ryan Williams. And, he's a big kid, 6'2", 210 pounds, can run sub 10-6 guy in the 100-meter. Love the run after catch ability. There were some question marks coming into this week. I think production-wise, left a little bit of food on the table. But he showed up today, 1-on-1, 7-on-7 team setting as well. He's a big physical kid that's going to have to get his sea legs under him. He's going to a great spot. Steve Sarkisian, he's going to have his time to kind of grow into himself at the next level. So It was encouraging. We needed to see that. I think we're holding our breath a little bit, but he had a good day today.
The number one player in the class in the 2024 group is also here. Jeremiah Smith, the 5-star wide receiver, headed to Ohio State. Will he still hang on to that number one spot?
Oh, I mean, I'll be honest. I was at breakfast this morning. Tom Loy, our good friend at 24/7 Sports, I said, I don't know, man. I'm a little concerned, right? Not concerned, but you start to overthink it. Jeremiah Smith's a guy, I've been evaluating him since he was a freshman, and then you see him, on the 7-on-7 circuit, the camp circuit. You see what he does as a junior, you see what he does as a senior, and you wonder if you're missing anything. And then you go out there on the practice field, and Jeremiah Smith, I mean, he's just the real deal. He's the most complete prospect here in the 2024 cycle. A guy that we think can step in. College coaches have said it. He could start at the Power 5 level right now today. So we'll see what happens. But every time that doubt starts to creep through, you watch Jeremiah Smith run a few routes, and you're like, okay, he is the real deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to my time at Washington, and I think about the receivers that we had there. Puka Nacua, Roma Dunze, those guys are pretty good. And then you think about a guy like Jeremiah Smith. I think he's the best receiver that I've seen since I've been doing it, whether it's on this side or the other side. During my time in player personnel, he is just such a clean prospect. And what does that mean? On and off the field, you got to be wired differently. He's had so much stuff thrown at him, right, in terms of NIL, being the number one player in the country. He came down, Ohio State, Miami. He's handled it perfectly. The other thing is, he's a pro. You think about Ohio State, that receiver room, that's what they do. They produce first-round talent after first-round talent. You think about a guy not only ready to play, I think this guy has a chance to step in Ohio State, be one of the best players at his position in the country from day one. He is completely different. So Drew's on the other side, and Drew's got the fatigue. He's been around him since he was 7th, 8th grade. This guy, for me, I love watching him play. Every time he goes out there, you expect him to win and to dominate. He's done that pretty much 9 out of 10 reps, and that's what the best player in the country is supposed to do.
I think the most impressive thing for him was like a simple 5-yard out route. At 214 pounds, he's dancing around making guys miss to pick up 3 extra yards. You look at Jeremiah Smith, almost seems like a tight end or a pass rusher out on this field right now, how built he is. And for him to just move that way, it was impressive. I mean, we have not seen that from a receiver in a while.
Jeremiah Smith and all the other players here in San Antonio will be looking to put on a show on Saturday here at the 2024 All-American Bowl. Emily, back to you.
Thanks, guys. Kind of feel like all my friends are hanging out without me, but seems like they're having fun. Hey, make sure you are locked into the College Football Recruiting Show on Monday for a full recap of the game and for a live commitment. One of the top players in Connecticut, the number 34 safety in the class, Ethan Long. His finalists, you see him there, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, and Penn State. So tune in Monday at 5 Eastern. Thank you so much for watching. One more reminder to hit the like button and subscribe on the way out. I'm Emily Proud, and this is the 24/7 Sports Transfer Portal Show.